this morning to our Veterans Day Assembly. We are very honored to have so many veterans in our presence. We are honored to let the students see the great accomplishments that you have made to the community. I was honored earlier to listen to Mr. and Mrs. Jim Warner talk a little bit about to a class some things that the family went through, that they saw, and I thought Jim made a great point. He said, you know, not everybody has to be in the military to make a contribution. It's a great thing, but students, you can make contributions through your community, through civic things. So those are avenues that I thought Jim touched on that was great for students to give back to their community and their veterans that are here now. So we are very grateful to have the veterans and let these guys take over. So thank you very much for being here.
Today we have joined together to honor America's veterans and celebrate their contributions to our way of life. Few have given more to our nation than the men and women who have served in our armed forces.
Thank you for joining us today as we honor our veterans. Please rise if you are able, remove your hats, and join me as our choir group sings the national anthem under the direction of Mrs. Heather McGee.
As a symbol of hope, flying in the name of peace and brotherhood of man. Would you please rise if you're able and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Attention, salute, pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. You may be seated.
Most of them were boys when they died. When they died, they gave up their chance to be husbands and fathers and grandfathers. They gave up everything for our country, for us. We owe them a debt we can never repay. All we can do is remember them, what they did, why they had to be brave for us.
As our founding fathers of this great nation created the Constitution, they understood the dedication it would take to make our country strong. Today, some of our third graders will recite the preamble in honor of our veterans. Please welcome Ms. Burleson's third grade class. Independence Day began.
This video explains some of the historical development of our national holiday, Veterans Day.
Soldiers from wars both old and new marched down city streets. Flags hang from homes, businesses, even car antennas. Ceremonies remember those who dutifully served their nation. It's Veterans Day, or Remembrance Day, as it's known in much of the world, a time to honor members of the armed forces. And it all began in a railroad car with a document to end the war to end all wars. World War I, also known as the Great War, shocked the global community with its unprecedented toll in human life. Untold millions were killed. Germany was running low on manpower and supplies, so they agreed to sign an armistice, or truce, in the French commander Ferdinand Foch's private railcar. On the 11th hour, on the 11th day of the 11th month of 1918, all was quiet on the Western Front. The fighting had ended. Exactly 1 year later, President Woodrow Wilson decreed that Americans should observe a moment of silence at 11 a.m. to remember the armistice and to embrace the peace. Other Allied nations commemorated the peaceful anniversary as well. In England and Canada, citizens wore paper poppies. Poppies had become a symbol of the armistice. The poem Flanders Field described a one-time battlefield. In Flanders Field, the poppies blow, between the crosses, row on row. In America, the nation's first unknown soldier was laid to rest at Arlington National Cemetery on Armistice Day, 1921. He was a casualty of the Great War. Since that first memorial, other unknown soldiers from America's wars have been interred in the tomb. And it's become tradition for the president or one of his representatives to lay a wreath on the monument every November 11th. A resolution was passed in 1926 inviting all Americans to remember Armistice Day and the soldiers who fought so hard for peace. The idea caught on. By 1938, the day was marked with so many ceremonies and parades, Congress made it a legal holiday, giving people the day off work. After World War II and the Korean War, Americans wanted to open up the holiday to include not just World War I veterans, but all who served in combat. In 1954, President Dwight Eisenhower, a World War II vet himself, legally changed the U.S. Armistice Day to Veterans Day, honoring those who served in all American wars. For a brief time, starting in 1971, Congress moved the holiday to the fourth Monday in October, giving Americans a 3-day weekend. But most people rejected the idea. The traditional date of November 11th, the anniversary of the Great War's ceasefire, was too historically important to forget. President Ford reversed the law in 1975, returning Veterans Day back to its rightful date. Over the decades, the holiday has changed with the times. Originally, it was a call for world peace. Then in the U.S., it became a day to remember war veterans. Today, Veterans Day is set aside to honor not just those who served in war, but also those who have served their nation in peace.
Veterans have sacrificed so many things to defend our nation and everything that this nation stands for. In gratitude, we honor our veterans for paying the price of freedom for all Americans.
Freedom is a beautiful thing we have in America, all due to the sacrifices of the veterans. Now please join us in a tribute as the first and second graders sing Sacrifices under the direction of Mrs. Heather McNeil.
All the sacrifices December 7, 1941, a date which will live in infamy.
Today, our very freedom came under attack in a series of deliberate and deadly terrorist acts.
There are many stories a soldier has to tell. Each veteran here today has a different story. Those who worked at everyday jobs during the Vietnam War have their own stories as well. Today, we'll hear two perspectives on that war. One from the soldier who had 3 tours of service and one who reported about it through daily radio broadcasts. Here are Keith and Margaret Smith with War Stories.
I grew up in Cherokee, maybe naive about the Vietnam War. 1965, the year I graduated from Cherokee High School with plans for college and a future career in radio and television. Just like every other graduating class, we all went our separate directions. I do remember a few of the boys signing up for ROTC, college, and the military service. That most generally meant they were headed for the Vietnam War. The war was worsening then. Marches were happening with 35,000 protesters in Washington. I was not aware of the magnitude of our involvement. However, in several months, I would find myself behind a microphone reporting about it.
I grew up in the southwest part of Oklahoma City, the son of a World War II and a Korean veteran. During World War II, my mother was a Rosie the Riveter. I lived just south of the North Canadian River. I spent my youth hunting, fishing, rafting on the river with my friends. Aside from these activities, the big thing was go to the movies on Saturday. We didn't have TVs and smartphones then. Usually we saw a cowboy movie or a World War II movie. World War II was still fresh in the minds of everyone then. And of course, John Wayne was always the hero. And all of us kids wanted to be like John Wayne. He was always the tough Marine. Maybe that's why I decided I wanted to be a Marine. I wanted to be John Wayne. Specifically, I wanted to be a Marine Corps sergeant. They were the tough guys. They got the job done.
1966. At this point, I was ripping and reading the news off of a clattering teletype machine. Stories about the subway strike in New York, literally bringing the city to a standstill. Inflation is on the rise. It's being blamed on the Vietnam War. Race riots continue to increase across cities in America. The National Guard has been called to bring back law and order. Other news, Protests against the Vietnam War are taking place in New York, Washington, D.C., and Chicago, while U.S. planes bomb Hanoi and Haiphong.
In early 1966, I joined the Marine Corps with plans to leave as soon as I get out of high school. About 2 months before we were out of high school, my friend Mike Dunham, we've been buddies since kindergarten, he decides he wants to join the Marine Corps too. So being the wise 18-year-old I was, I took him down to the Merle Federal Building in Oklahoma City to help him sign up, because I'd already met the recruiters. They were nice guys, very helpful guys. They suggested that if we wanted to stay together, we'd have to go for 4 years. I had already enlisted for 2, but Mike insisted we needed to be together, so I changed my plans and joined for 4. So 2 days after graduating from high school, Mike and I go to the Merle Building again, where we took our final physicals and pledged our oath of service. The oath that all enlisted men take upon ending service. This is an oath for a lifetime, not just for the length of our service. A couple of hours after taking the pledge, we're on an aircraft leaving Will Rogers Airport, headed to San Diego, California, where we will be met by a drill sergeant. Drill sergeants aren't nearly as friendly as recruiters. He seemed to hate everybody and everything about us. We're loaded on buses, and then we're taken to MCRD, San Diego, California, where we're placed on those famous footsteps, the yellow footprints that we stand on for about 4 or 5 hours. Finally, about 4:30 in the morning, they open the door. We're lined up, we go in for a haircut. They say, "How would you like it cut?" As they shave it all off. Then we're taken into a room, told to strip down, put all your clothes, everything you own in a box, address it to your home, it's going home. Then we're issued in uniforms. And day 1 of training starts. 6 or 7 weeks into training, everything's been going good. All of a sudden, I'm sidelined with an injury. I'll spend the next 2 months recovering from that. My friend Mike and the rest of my platoon goes on and completes their training. I'm 2 months behind from now on. I'll never serve side by side with Mike again. Funny, 15 months later, he's out on a medical discharge. I'm in Vietnam for 2.5 years. Somehow this didn't work out. I spent the rest of 1966 in training.
News from Vietnam. A series of border battles in remote Doc Tu, Con Thien, and Khe Sanh. The Army and Marines face relentless onslaught from the North Vietnamese. We're sending a reporter to the field while here hundreds and thousands of anti-war protesters gather for demonstrations in Central Park, New York, and in our nation's capital.
January 1967. I'm assigned to duty at Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. It's boring here. Anything to get out of here. So when they asked for 3 volunteers to go to Vietnam, I stepped forward with 2 other men. In a few days, we're on our way to Camp Pendleton, final training, staging battalion. We're going to be going over in a short time. About a week before leaving for Nam, I ran into a buddy of mine, Jerry Johnson. He was working the mess hall. We were going through getting chow. I didn't even know he was in the Marine Corps. We visited for a few minutes, for a very few minutes. But I'm holding up the chow line, and the guys are hungry. And they could care less if I just met an old friend. On a Wednesday morning in early June, we had boarded a plane to Okinawa, where we'll leave our dress uniforms and other things behind that we won't need in Vietnam. When we land in Vietnam, I'll never forget as the plane doors opened and we started deplaning, the heat and the smell. This is the way it will be every day for the next 2.5 years, except when the monsoons come. As we land, there's a line of Marines waiting to board. They look tired, dirty, worn out, and somehow different from us. They start saying things to us. They're talking in a language I don't quite understand, part English, part French, part Vietnamese. I guess we'll have to figure out this language. We're going to survive here. Some of them are pointing at us, laughing, saying, that guy won't last long, he'll be dead in a day or two. We didn't know. After reporting into headquarters, I'm assigned duty in Northern I Corps. I say goodbye to the 2 guys I met from Camp Lejeune who had been with me through training all the way to here. It's the last time I'll see these 2 guys. I was on my own, had to find a way to get to my unit in Northern I Corps. I caught a ride on a C-130. I'm lucky, didn't have to ride a truck. I get a seat, I'm still lucky. The middle of the plane is full of cargo. Some of the guys are sitting on that. The crew seems relaxed, just another day at the office. That is until just before landing. We come in hard and fast, and for a minute I think we're crashing. But soon I learned this is the way you take off and land in the hot zone. The airstrip had been mortared just before we got there. As the plane lands and spins around at the end of the runway and starts at the auxiliary ramp, they drop the back ramp. Cargo's being shoved out. They're screaming, get out, get out. Somehow we get out without getting hit with cargo or anything else. Another group of men are running towards the plane. They're going home or on R&R. Also, there's a group of men carrying large, heavy plastic bags. And they start loading them on the aircraft. I realize these are the remains of the unlucky ones heading home for the last time. Rude awakening, this is a real deal. I spent the rest of 1967 getting used to Vietnam, patrols, and ambushes. I learned how to spot booby traps and how to stay alive. The country has an odor of decay. We're always wet from sweat or rain, always slipping and sliding in the mud of the rice paddies. At first, guys aren't very friendly, and they let you know. One thing they care about, where are you from? You're green, you might get me killed, keep your distance. You have to prove yourself, you have to survive. The end of 1967, my first Christmas and holiday season in Vietnam. I sure miss Mom's cooking. We're eating sea rations here. I haven't seen Bob Hope or Raquel Welch. I hear they're in the country, but I guess I won't see them this year.
From the station, Christmas is upon us. Sales are good this year, and in other news, Elvis Presley and new wife Priscilla are doing just fine. Bob Hope is doing his Christmas show somewhere in Vietnam. Merry Christmas, everyone.
January 1968, just prior to the Tet Offensive, I received a letter from home with a news clipping. My friend Jerry Johnson, the guy in the chow line, has been killed in action. He's been in Vietnam 11 days. I've been here for over 200 now. I'm lucky.
Surprise attacks are reported in the early hours today. The Tet Offensive simultaneously sent some 85,000 troops under direction of North Vietnam. Americans see this as costing American lives in the face of an unbeatable enemy.
I have been assigned Tiger Papa 6, 3rd Marines, 4th Combined Action Company. 7 to 8 Marines, 1 Navy Corpsman, 20 to 25 South Vietnamese Popular Forces. Our jobs, training on the job in the field, patrolling, ambushing, trying to get information, trying to keep these villages safe from the North Vietnamese Army. During the Tet Offensive, we're out of touch with just about everyone. We're low on ammo and food. We're eating rice from the villagers before we finally get resupplied. We are a small unit and usually outnumbered. We will rely heavily on air support and artillery to keep us alive. We try to find the NBA without them seeing us, then call airstrikes and artillery. We're working close enough to the DMZ that sometimes they see us when they call artillery on us. This isn't pleasant.
Surprisingly, the U.S. military has been successful against Tet attacks, though still losing 500 soldiers a week. Coming out of Washington, this is, and I quote, "a weakening of communist forces and strength." Our reporter on the ground has found some resentment among the troops, accusing major networks of hot and run reporting, getting news and pictures of the latest firefights by riding helicopters in and out of the battlefields, all in one day. Our reporter has stayed in the field. Viewers see the combat, the mines, the medical helicopters, and then cut to a commercial. Maybe they have a point.
April 1968, we're crossing a rice paddy. We're ambushed from a tree line along the river. They hit us with machine gun fire and mortars. We were pinned down for about 2 hours. Seems like 2 months. I started smoking today. Someone said it helps your nerves. And since we get 4 cigarettes in each C ration box, that's about what I'll smoke a day while I'm here in Nam. It's July 1968. My first tour of duty is over and I'm headed back to the States for 30 days of leave. I've extended my tour in Vietnam. I'll be reporting back to the same company on another tour. It's good to be home, see the family, but it's boring. Most of my high school friends are now in the service, most in Vietnam. America isn't very welcoming to men in uniform. Most of the girls aren't interested in talking to or being seen with the soldier. No one understands what's really going on. I'm anxious to return to Vietnam.
Just in, hot off the teletype, Martin Luther King is assassinated. Violence breaks out in America with racial riots. The National Guard is called out.
Upon returning to Vietnam, back to the daily patrols and ambushes at night, C rations and 4 cigarettes a day. The work continues on. It's my second Christmas here. By now I'm considered an old salt. A sergeant who will spend the rest of my tour leading a platoon. It's a tough job. I make choices that sometimes decide someone's fate. I say who walks point on patrol, although we all take turns. Sometimes you're lucky, sometimes you're not. I've been luckier than others.
The Concorde test flight is conducted in France, and Jumbo 747 makes its debut. The first man landed on the moon on the Apollo 11 mission. Woodstock has attracted 350,000 rock and roll fans. Also in the news, President Nixon has assumed responsibility for the Vietnam War, and according to the White House, his escalation of battle will inevitably bring to an end the U.S. involvement. 58,220 to date, the number of lives lost in Vietnam.
About 3:30 in the morning, we move into position along the river where the water's shallow. This is where the enemy will cross. The Army is doing a sweep on the other side, pushing them towards us. We'll have them tracked. We wait about 7 hours. We get word the sweep is complete, no enemy contact. I stand up, lean against a tree, and start to light my first cigarette of the day. The sniper puts 3 bullets in the tree next to my head. Apparently smoking is hazardous to your health. My lucky day. Not so for the sniper. My buddy had my back. Along about this point in my Vietnam service, I'm again here over 2 years now. Nothing has changed. We've been here day after day, not winning, not losing, just continuing on.
In the news from Boston, 1969 brings an estimated 100,000 persons shouting in cadence that they want the Vietnam War ended. It makes a bold statement. Walter Cronkite has ended his newscast by sharing his thoughts on the war. For it seems now more certain than ever that the bloody experience of Vietnam is an end to a stalemate. To say that we are closer to victory today is to believe, in the face of the evidence, the optimists who have been wrong in the past.
October 1969, when I returned to the U.S. My final tour is over. I've been lucky. Going through the airports on the way home, we're required to be in uniform so that we can get our military discounts. Most people look at us with disgust. Some people look away. We have done what our country asks us to do. The men I've served with have made the same sacrifices that all veterans before us have made. Why is our blood, sweat, and tears different from theirs? In February 1970, I'm discharged from active service. I return home, storing my military uniform in my sea bag and putting it away. I won't open that bag again for many years. We don't talk about Vietnam. We don't talk about the Marine Corps. We hear the news reports. We see the pictures of our airmen who are prisoners in Hanoi. At this point, I'm smoking 4 packs a day. Somebody might say I'm nervous. For the first year I'm home, I find myself always looking for something. Every time I get up and change locations, I finally figure out it's the rifle that I always kept so close to me for so long. It'll be a long time before I fire a rifle again. In 2014, Margaret and I made a trip to Washington, D.C. to the Vietnam Veterans Memorial. I went with my old friend Mike Dunham and his wife, lifelong friend. I've forgiven him for the extra 2 years in the Corps I got. After all, him and his wife introduced me to the love of my life, Margaret. I find the name of Jerry Johnson and others that I served with on the wall. With a pencil in hand, we scratch off pencil off the name. I think about Jerry now and then, and I think about the war every day. These servicemen here today, and women, they're my brothers and sisters. We took an oath, and we have kept it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Keith and Margaret. You shared a deeply personal journey that will allow all of us to better understand what it means to be a veteran and to serve our country.
It has been said that a hero is someone who has given his life to something bigger than himself. Cherokee students, you are in the midst of heroes in this very auditorium today. These men and women have given themselves so that you and I can have the freedoms that we have today. As we honor and celebrate the contributions of all of our nation's veterans, we take special pride in those veterans who live right here in our community and surrounding communities. At this time, we would like to recognize all veterans who are present. We kindly request each veteran to stand, if possible, as we announce his or her name, and while we read a brief history of service. Our first one is Malachi Claflin, who isn't with us today, but we would still like to recognize and honor him for his service in the Army. His rank is sergeant. He served for 6.5 years, and his honors include